Well, it's good to see our church family, and man, would love again to have lunch with you. You're like, man, he's talking about lunch so much. It's because I'm getting hungry. I didn't eat breakfast, so you guys are smart. You're like, we're gonna come to the second service because he'll be hungry, and so he'll finish quicker. Then I see what you're doing there. I see what you're doing. Well, welcome to everybody listening after the fact. I'm excited because we're launching into a new series of talks for the next 3 weeks. We've called Connect Track, and I'm really excited because as I've looked back on sermon series that we've done in the past, I sometimes look at them and I go like, man, God did a lot more through that than I actually anticipated that he would. The opposite is also true. I've also looked at some and been like, man, what were we thinking? Like, I don't know what we were thinking there, but I don't want to be kind of overstated or speculate, but I really believe God could do something great through these next few weeks as we dive into this, because this is really, we're really building a foundation for something new for this year. And really building foundation as a church, capital C church, us as people, not this building, not Resound, but for something we believe God is going to do through us. And so if you call Resound Church your home, I pray that this is going to be encouraging for you and a reminder or a building of your faith and who you are, who God says you are, how you connect with God. And if you're new to Resound Church, the community, you're thinking about making Resound Church your home, whatever the case is, you couldn't have come in a more perfect time. Because we are laying some foundational things here for what God is about to do. For the last number of months, we've talked a lot about breakthrough. We believe God is going to do something amazing in and through us in 2020. And that goes for not just Resound Church as a whole, but for us as individuals who do make up Resound Church. You and I are Resound Church. It's not this building. And so these next couple weeks, whether you've been in church, you're new to Resound, new to faith, whatever the case is, this is all about growing in your connection to God, who God says you are, and connection to the church as a whole, all of us who follow Jesus. And so I pray this would be clarifying maybe in a lot of ways, and that it would build your faith. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to share scripture to open up in Matthew 28. It's a scripture you may have heard before, or maybe not, that's okay. But if you have, I want to encourage you. Oftentimes what happens when you hear things over and over, the temptation is to just check out a little bit, maybe not intentionally, you just do. And so, I don't know, any spouses that are like, yeah, they totally do that, you know? So I want to encourage you as I read this. This is a foundational passage for who we are as believers, who we are as a church, and the Bible is described as living and active, meaning it's not going to change, but God can speak something fresh through it. It's whether you've heard it once or 1,000 times. And so in Matthew 28, verse 18, this is Jesus talking to his disciples after his resurrection, and so he gathers them all together and he says, I've been given all authority, or another translation says power, in heaven and on earth. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. In other words, teach them how to grow. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So the context is important here. So Jesus gathers his disciples together who have actually really just let him down. Really just kind of failed him. Their last interaction was in the garden. Jesus is about to be arrested and crucified, and he just needs his people around him, and they're having a hard time kind of taking it seriously in the moment, and they keep falling asleep, and then Jesus is arrested, and they don't follow to see if they can help. They actually run away, and some of them even deny knowing Jesus. They're like, that guy, no, never seen him in my life. And that's their last interaction with Jesus before he's crucified. So now he's risen from the dead. He gathers them all back together. And I don't know if you have anybody that reports to you in life, like maybe your manager, maybe you own a business, maybe you have contractors who have worked on your home, maybe you have kids, people who kind of report to you a little bit. And if those people fail you or they, mess up, do you tend to give them more responsibility or less responsibility? Hopefully, if you're a normal person, you end up giving them less responsibility until they can prove themselves. That's just generally how we respond to things. But Jesus comes to these disciples who just let him down with their faults, their shortcomings, their failures, and he gives them actually more to do. He asked them to do something that he even never actually did. He says, take this gospel message and go global with it. Like, take it around the world. And Jesus, when he was here, he never did a short-term mission trip to a foreign country. He never spoke through a translator. He never, just never did these little mission trips or anything like that. They're not bad. He just never did them, unless you count like heaven to earth, maybe, coming from heaven to earth. I guess that we'll give him that one. But he says, take this message and go global with it. Share it with others. Let people know about my love and salvation. And so I look at this verse where he gives this great commission to go into all the world and make disciples. And I look at the 4 things he said. He said, make disciples, baptize them, teach them how to grow, and know I'm with you always. And I'm looking at this, and for me, maybe it's just the day and age we live, it seems a little bit out of order to me. Like, if I were sharing it and I were Jesus, I would be like, all right, firstly, before anything, don't freak out. Just know that I'm with you always. All right, it'll be all right. The goal here is to baptize as many people as possible. And so we want you to teach them how to grow, and so disciples can be made. Like, that seems more of a little bit of an order to me. Like, don't freak out. We're going to baptize some people and make disciples. That seems like the order to me. But Jesus says, make disciples first and then baptize them. And so I think he's given us a clue into maybe who a disciple is, what disciples do, and what they do it for. And if you're new to church, that word disciple could be, we don't use it a lot outside of the church world. So it could be a churchy word maybe for you. And disciple, for me, I grew up in church. And my perception, maybe yours is similar, is that disciples were like the super Christians of like they knew how to read the Bible in its original languages, and they would pray for hours a day, and they would read their Bible and do all this stuff. They were like the A-team of the Christian faith. They were the Avengers of the Christian world. And that was my perception. They are graduate level Christians, and maybe I'll be that someday. Maybe I'll get there, but probably not. Who knows? But that's not how Jesus defines a disciple. Not this uber Christian, this super Christian, but the way that he defines it, if I were to try and pick it out, the most plainest verbiage possible is a disciple is somebody who chooses to trust Jesus more than just their own logic, feelings, or emotions, and begin to follow him by reading his word, by reading the Bible. In its most basic form, somebody who chooses to trust Jesus when they might feel one way, they trust what Jesus says, or when a situation might look one way, they're trusting Jesus, and they become more like him as they dive into his word. And not just reading the Bible like, you've ever done those, like read the Bible in a year kind of things? I do that, and for me, it's kind of like it could become a checkbox, like, all right, got my Bible reading in, and I can get in the Bible, but sometimes the word of God doesn't get in me. And I would rather, as you read the Word of God and become more like him, just grab one verse and just say, okay, God, what are you trying to say? How does this apply to my life? How does this apply to my marriage? How does this apply to my finances? How does this apply to my work, to my career? Just grab that one and start applying it, and that's the difference. You start doing that every day, you'll see spiritual growth. Because the most common analogy for your relationship with Jesus is a walk. It's not a flight. It's not a sprint or a jog. It's a walk. It's one step at a time. He's just saying, what's the next step? Just take the next step. Walk with me. And what happens is, as I do this, as you do this, as imperfectly as we do, every day we become a little bit more like Jesus. And we look back and we say, man, I've grown from where I was. That's where I was 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. But it's the key is that word application. How does the Word of God apply to my life? And so I think the reason Jesus put it in the order that he did, make disciples, baptize them, is because he wanted to show us not just how to grow spiritually, but also why we grow spiritually. Because I think if you've grown up in church, if you've been around a while, maybe not, you can lose, whatever the case is, you can kind of lose the why. You can kind of end up going through the motions a little bit, like this is what you do, and you just kind of forget the why. And, Jesus is saying yes, get in my word, spend time in prayer, do these spiritual practices. All that is great, but if you miss the why, it can become pretty toxic. It can actually kind of hurt your walk with God if you lose the why behind why you're growing spiritually. And so I've been in seasons where, for me, The why had to become that this is to go make disciples. My walk with Jesus is to go reach more people with Jesus. Because I went to ministry school. I grew up in church. So I've been in class, after group, after study, after book. Like I've done a lot. I had a lot of Bible knowledge, and that's been great. But at times my Bible knowledge, it can get a little bit ahead of my obedience. Like you can actually, I educated myself beyond my level of obedience to what God was saying. And so I knew a lot of Bible stuff. That's great. But it didn't change the way I treated people. Or it didn't change the way that maybe I acted or things that I said or things that I did. And so Jesus is like, yes, I want you to grow. There are going to be things for you along this journey, but it's not only about you. It's about taking this God, the Jesus that you know, and inviting and introducing other people to Jesus, because a lot of people don't get it. They think it's a religion. They think it's just you check boxes. They look maybe from the outside looking in, and this can look a little weird to a lot of people because of their past experiences. But that's why Jesus is like, go into all the world and make disciples, be externally focused. Maybe a good analogy is, does anybody have toddlers at home? Let me know because we want to pray for you. Maybe you've had toddlers or nieces or nephews or grandkids, little kids. You ever go out to eat with those blessings? It's an adventure. It's a journey, right? You got to get the backpack, and it's got to be full of entertainment for them. Hopefully the place you're going has like crayons and color things. They're going to get the high chair. They're going to put you in the booth in the back where you won't annoy anybody. And it becomes just this whole ordeal. And when it's time to eat, who generally eats first? The kids do. The kids eat first. And then the parents eat. Why? Because that's what mature people do. They say, I'm going to feed the kid, I'm going to make sure you're good, and then I'm going to eat. I know I'm going to eat, but I'm going to make sure that you're good. I think the same is true in the church. I think the same is true when it comes to the gospel of Jesus. Like, yes, there's going to be things that I'm going to eat and I'm going to grow, but I'm going to help you eat. I'm going to help you, bring you in. And this is not just me saying this so that we can go reach more people. Like, this is what Jesus said. There's 3 times in Luke 15, if memory serves, because I've memorized the Bible. I have it written down over there. In Luke 15, when Jesus tells 3 stories about lost things in the Bible, and he's making the exact same point with all 3 stories, which tells me he probably told it and was like, they didn't quite get it yet. So he told a second story. It's like, close, but maybe not. So he told a third story about that. The first it was a lost coin, then a lost sheep, then a lost son. These things that are increasing in value to try and make this point where the people who lost these things, they were distracted, they were obsessed until they found it. And he's saying, you know what? We serve a God who is obsessed by lost things, who says, yes, I want to get back to you. That was the point of Jesus dying on the cross, so we could be made right with Jesus and come back to him. I mean, have you ever lost something? Have you lost keys, maybe? I don't know if there's anything that challenges my faith more. And ask Ashley, I try, but I get so mad over stupid things like that just eat my time. I don't got time to go around trying to find my keys. If they were where I put them when I got home, then we wouldn't have this problem. Or your wallet, maybe, you're like trying to think of the cards that you got to cancel now, checking your bank accounts and stuff. Anybody ever lost a child? I know, right? You talk about anxiety. When Ashley was out and about once, about maybe a year ago or so, I was at home, probably, doing, typical father things like cleaning the house and baking, probably bathing the kids, stuff like that, And there was a time where the kids were playing, Isla and Emerson, and then all of a sudden it got kind of quiet. And so I came in, and Emerson was still there, hanging out, but Isla was gone. And so I called her, I looked in her room, I looked in my room, so now we're at about a minute of no response, not knowing where she is, and okay, it's not, we'll find her, start looking in the bathrooms, start looking under the sinks, I don't know, places that she might be under her bed, maybe doing something, and can't find her anywhere. Now she is old enough that she can break out, she can jailbreak, and so I start looking outside and calling for her, but trying to do the call that, doesn't indicate to others that you've lost a child, Isla, like trying to be calm about it so people aren't worried. And but I can't find her anywhere. It's like 5 minutes. I'm running around, and it's a panic, right? It's this, I forget about everything in that moment until you find her. Eventually found her. She was hiding in the garage. She had like candy, like behind a box or something like that. So that's why she was hiding. Dad of the year. But in that moment, like I was obsessed. I didn't think about anything else until I found where she was. Like, I could be hungry, but I ain't stopping to make myself any food until I find where she was at. I can have my closest friends or mentors or whatever come to my door and be like, hey, do you want to hang out? And be like, well, I've lost a child. And they could be like, sure, I'm sure she'll turn up. But their apathy would like annoy me because it's the only thing that I'm thinking about in that moment. And I think that's exactly what God is saying about the world today, that he's distracted, obsessed with things that are lost, and saying, you know what, you who are spiritually growing, who have found me, I want you to get in the game and help connect people to me who are lost. I think maybe one of the greatest analogies, I think, as followers of Jesus that we can have is, each of us, we have to wear a bib and we have to wear an apron. Like you got to be able to be spiritually fed. You got to be spiritually feeding yourself. You got to wear that bib. And here's the thing, you can't leave spiritual growth to like the 90 minutes we have on a Sunday morning, or the ministry professionals or whatever. Like we got to get to this place in our walk where we're able to feed ourselves from God's word and hearing him, praying to him through spiritual practices. But we also have to wear an apron and be able to serve others. And what happened, because if you just eat and just consume, then you're going to get spiritually fat, and you're just going to keep coming at but without giving. But if you just keep giving, you're not going to have what you need to keep going. You need to have the bib and that apron that, yes, I'm being fed, but I'm also serving others. And so let me tell you what this Connect track is all about. That was my intro. I needed to set the stage a little bit. And don't worry, I'll get through the rest of this pretty quick. But I need to set the stage for who we believe that we are as followers of Jesus, what we're called to do as followers of Jesus and as a church. It's that Matthew 28 mission, what Jesus said, go make disciples. And so we like to say it this way, that we exist to connect people to Jesus and each other. And I don't want you to think of it as like a gimmick or as a great saying or anything like that, because it's not. It's how we live the gospel. We're here to connect people to Jesus. And we don't say connect them to church. We say connect people to Jesus because we're not trying to connect people to a religion. We want them to start a relationship with Jesus. I think most people, if you were to ask them, maybe in here, maybe go out, if you were to ask most people if they believe in God, they believe in God in some way, shape, or form. They just don't know what they believe about God. Or they don't know what to do next, maybe. Sometimes that next step is just coming to church. And do you remember your first time in a church? Like, that can be a daunting thing. There can be a lot of, like, maybe you have past church experience, and you're like, I don't know what it's going to be like, if I'm going to know the songs, if I'm going to have to stand up and introduce myself, if, I don't, people, these are things that people say, like, I don't know what it's going to be like. And so that's why we're on this mission to connect people with Jesus and each other. And that's why we do things like have teams who set up coffee and it's not about the coffee. The coffee's not going to, ensure your salvation to heaven, but we're tearing down walls for people who are coming in for maybe the first time in a very long time. It's why you might walk in there and you might hear a little "Don't Stop Believing" in the lobby, because it's not about us. We're trying to tear down walls that people might have, and it's not going to make or break their salvation. We just want to connect as many people to Jesus as possible and connect them to each other, because this is about building God's kingdom, reaching more people, reaching more places. This is about a city who is lost, and Jesus is saying, look, you have found me and you are spiritually growing, but get in the game. Help connect people to Jesus, to me. And so that's what I hope you'll see as the mission of Resound Church, is to connect as many people to Jesus as possible. And so what I hope to answer just in the next 2 weeks as we unpack this a little bit, what I hope maybe you'll help me break the national statistic average of, like coming to church once a month or whatever it is, and maybe try and come these next couple weeks, because we're laying a foundation as a church for what God is about to do. We're laying a foundation and being on the same page for what we believe as a church, because God, the word we've shared is God is going to bring breakthrough. That is what we feel God's speaking strongly. And so it's important for you as a follower of Jesus, me as a follower of Jesus, to know what is our mission. We're here to connect people to Jesus and each other. And we're going to do everything short of sinning to connect more people. People don't know how hard it is to be a pastor, man. You got to try and use language like that without tying your words, and it's a miracle I don't curse every week. But here's what I hope to answer in the next couple weeks. It's one, why does Resound Church do what we do the way we do it? Every Bible teaching church in the area, in the city, is living out that same mission of Matthew 28, to build disciples. The difference in churches is just how we do it, how we seek to accomplish that. You might see like different programs, different service times, different methodology, or whatever you want, philosophy. And I have to make abundantly clear that contrary to popular belief, churches are not at competition with other churches. Resound Church is not in competition with Sunrise. We're not in competition with Beaverton Foursquare. We're not in competition with Evergreen Christian Center. We're not in competition with Colossae. In fact, we're actually cheering these guys on. Why are we cheering these guys on? Because when the tide rises, all ships rise with the tide. And I am under no illusion that we as a church, as a body, can accomplish the Great Commission on our own. Like, we cannot do that. If something were to happen and groves and droves and hundreds and thousands of people were to come into church next week, there would not actually be enough churches in the area to house them all. That's why we always want to be planting more churches and reaching more people, not just to amass a crowd on a weekend, not just to say, look how many people we've got coming to our campuses, but to say, these are people we are trying to reach with the gospel. We need to keep planting churches, and the reason we need more churches is because there's different people. Different people need different things. You know, for us, we know our model is a little bit different than others. You know, we don't believe in just necessarily building one large campus, but we believe in going outwards and reaching more people. And so when people say, well, you should be just, you shouldn't be focusing efforts in Denver and in Orange County and in the Netherlands, you should just bring that all together in one campus. Maybe, but for us, we feel like that's what God has called us to do. That's why we want to plant more campuses in the area, in Beaverton, out in Forest Grove, and because that's what we just feel God has called us to do. And the difference, the methods might be different, but the mission is the same. And it's important to not confuse those two. Like, remember the mission of connecting people to Jesus, but the methods are what help us accomplish that. The mission never changes. The methods may change. I love in 1 Chronicles 12, I love this description of this tribe in Israel. It says, from the tribe of Issachar, there were 200 leaders of the tribe and their relatives. All these men understood the signs of the times and knew the best course for Israel to take. I believe God has called us, you, me, in our day, in this age, in this time, in this city where we are, to recognize how to reach more people. And I get it. Like, I have been guilty of saying, man, this class is something that really helped me once. Or when we sang this song, it really ministered to me years ago, and holding on to that method. But methods change. But the mission never changes. The mission is to always connect people to Jesus. And so we got to not confuse the two. We can sometimes hold on so tightly to methods that it distracts us from the mission. The mission is what Jesus calls us to. And so the other question I hope I'll answer for you as a follower of Jesus is, how do I grow spiritually at Resound? You're like, I hear you, reach more people, connect more people to Jesus. That's great. But how do I actually grow spiritually? It's a fair question. Because, like I said, our goal is not to amass a crowd on a weekend. I was just loosely calculating this morning. So in 3 weeks, we launch our Netherlands campus and our Orange County campus. We will be going from 2 to 4 campuses, which means on every given Sunday, we will have around 1,000-ish plus people who come to our Resound church to worship God, which is pretty crazy. But our goal is to not amass a crowd on a weekend. I don't want us just to be observers of what God is doing. I want us as a church to be participants, not to become like religious consumers of spiritual goods and services, but contributors to what God wants to do through the church, through Resound Church, through the church as a whole, as not Resound, but as people who follow Jesus. And so many of you, maybe you've taken steps. You're like, oh, well, I'm involved in this way, or I've given my life to Jesus, or, what I hope is to answer in the next couple weeks what your next step might be. This is, in a sense, we're going to be offering this as a class after we speak it here on Sunday morning. So if you come here, you don't have to go. Congrats. But this is kind of like membership to a degree. If you grew up in church, do you remember like membership, like church membership? They would do like membership voting and membership. Like all you had to do was like come 2 weeks and you mysteriously ended up on this list. Then you were a member now and you could come to vote. And statistically speaking, a church is they have about 3 times what their Sunday attendance is in members, people who call the church home. And it's just the national average. And so it's not for us though. Membership is not like you're on this roll and you're doing this thing. For us, membership, in a biblical sense, at least what we read in the Bible, membership was really just about engagement in a movement. It was about engagement in what God was doing, engagement in where God was leading. It was leaning in, following Jesus. And so, ultimately, at the end of the day, I would love to help you figure out what your next step is in that process. Maybe you're here today and you've never given your life to Jesus. You've just been checking out the church thing. If you're not a follower of Jesus, then I would love to invite you to start. And here's the thing, it's not a complicated thing. Like I said, today was going to be foundational, and we're going to build on this in the next couple of weeks, but you don't have to know a lot about the Bible. It might be a little messy. You might be like, I'm in a painful situation right now. That's actually a perfect time to come to Jesus, as you're sitting in a room full of people who don't have it all together, who don't really have all the answers yet, who don't have it all figured out. So, welcome home in many ways, but you don't have to have it all figured out, because it's a relationship. It's not a religion. Religion is like, figure it all out, answer all the questions, and then convert. A relationship is, you'll have questions. You might even have issues. And this might be something that continues on, but you're trusting Jesus and following him, trusting that he has the answer. So I want to give you that opportunity today, if you haven't decided to follow Jesus, to start. Maybe you are a follower of Jesus and you're not really locked into a local church. And you know what? If that's Resound Church, then great. If not, what I hope that this will do, I believe that God has called us all to be the church and be living on mission with a church. And if it's Resound Church for you, great. If it's not Resound Church, well, my hope is that this will bring some clarity so maybe I do know what church I do need to lock into. I'd much rather you have clarity about where you need to live on mission and not just, connect you to here. I'll be sad if you go. My staff will have to, console me and make me feel better again. But I hope that it'll bring clarity. And, you look around, we have great churches in the area. And that's the thing with, America. We have so many churches. And what we could sometimes do is go, well, I like the worship over here, but I like, groups over here, and I like, the teaching over there, and we can look at all these different things, and kind of encourage you, there's not a perfect church out there, but we're called to plug into a church and live life on mission together. If you find a perfect church, don't go. You'll mess it up. But today I want to give you an opportunity to follow Jesus, and I want to actually, if that's new for you, or maybe you've given your life to Jesus before, who knows, I want to show you how the original followers of Jesus, I'll close with this. This is how the original followers of Jesus started following him, the disciples. In John 1, verse 35, it says, the following day, John, this is John the Baptist, was again standing with 2 of his disciples as Jesus walked by. John looked at him and declared, look, there's the Lamb of God. When John's 2 disciples heard this, they followed Jesus. Jesus looked around and saw them following, and I think this is hilarious. He's like, what do you want? They replied, Rabbi, which means teacher, where are you staying? And come and see, he said. So Andrew, get this part. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the men who heard what John said and then followed Jesus. Andrew went to find his brother Simon and told him, we found the Messiah. And Andrew brought Simon to meet Jesus. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, hey, come follow me. And Philip was from Bethsaida, which was Andrew and Peter's hometown. And Philip went to look for Nathanael, an old college buddy, and told him, we have found the very person Moses and the prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth. And Nazareth, he said, can anything good come from Nazareth? Well, come and see for yourself, Philip replied. And so he came. And what I hope you'll see in all of this is that all these initial followers of Jesus, they didn't quite have all their questions answered yet. They didn't have their beliefs locked down. There was a simple invitation to start following Jesus, and they took the step. And what I hope you'll understand is it's the same for you and I today. That it's not, we don't have to have your beliefs on lock and know what have all the answers, but it's a simple invitation. Jesus says, just come follow me. And, maybe you are here and you have followed Jesus in the past, but you kind of let it go to the side. You've trusted kind of your own feelings and your own logic, and you look and you're like, man, how is this going for me? Like, I sometimes good. Other times it's like, I feel like there's something more. So Jesus comes and he says, look, just trust me. Start the walk. It's one step. Start following me. And what Jesus exemplifies is the first step after deciding to follow Jesus is to be baptized. Now, if you're new to church, it could be kind of a weird word, like baptism. You don't use it a lot outside of this. And baptism, I believe one of the reasons Jesus exemplified it is because it's the tangible expression of what God is doing on the inside. Like, think of it, so I'm married, I have a ring, and the ring doesn't make me any more married, doesn't make me any less married. It's just the tangible thing that says I'm married, to let people know and to begin to walk that out in my everyday. Think of baptism like that. Like, baptism doesn't make or break your relationship with Jesus. It is the outward expression of saying, look, I believe that when I go down in the water and I come back up, I'm leaving the old me behind. That part of me is dead. I come up a new person, following Jesus, doing what he says. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have it all figured out. I'm just simply invited, and I'm going to trust Jesus as I take one step at a time. And so I don't know what your next step is maybe today. Maybe you need to start following Jesus today. Maybe you have followed Jesus and you need to give your life to Jesus. Maybe you have given your life to Jesus, but you've never been baptized. And we love to celebrate that with you. We'd love to, after service, if you're like, man, I've never been baptized, or I did, but it was like I was sprinkled as a kid, or it didn't really mean anything to me. They know there's a reason we don't do that because we believe that this is a choice. This is something you do as a physical act. It's just like we don't just, marry little babies, It's their choice, usually. And, but we do this as a physical expression. And so if you want to be baptized, we'd love to celebrate that moment with you. Grab one of those little blue cards out of the back of your seat. Just fill it out. Just drop it with one of our ushers on the way out so we can celebrate that with you. But maybe you've just not given your life to Jesus yet, and you're like, that's the next step I need to take. Then I'd love to pray with you this morning. You're like, yeah, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to at least take the step.